In 1999, America faced its highest death penalty executions since its reinstatement in 1976. 279 people were sentenced that year in 1999, and 98 of the prisoners were actually executed. With something that's so polarizing and a lot of various different opinions, capital punishment is something that's really important to stay informed on. And especially here in the United States, opinions are very different on it. So today I'm going to be talking about just the basis of capital punishment and just some information you should know to be able to build your opinion on it. This is really important to understand and listen to, because to be able to form an opinion, you really need unbiased information. And even when I was looking up research for this speech, it was very hard to find information that wasn't trying to persuade me one way or the other. So really getting to know and understand information about the death penalty and its general vibe about it is really important in making that step. So to help you become informed and be able to form an opinion, I'm going to be talking about what capital punishment is, its kind of general history, how it's applied, and the current standing and future of capital punishment here in the United States. So what is capital punishment? In a definitional kind of terms, it is the authorized killing of a person for a crime that they committed. So the first case we saw of this in North America was actually in 1608 in Jamestown, Virginia, and it was to a man named Captain George Kendall, and he was executed for mutiny. So this case is really interesting to look into and understand, because in just 1608, it was kind of a baseline case of what capital punishment looks like then and kind of now. Kim Masters is a woman who has held an arsenal of positions surrounding science, education, and environment. She released a paper kind of going into the death penalty, and she mentions in this case this first example of the death penalty. And she notes in her paper how the trials and procedures that happened with him are kind of very similar to what happens now. And it's a very general basis of how we've kind of formed our capital punishment procedures. Kendall was given a jury of his peers. They all consecutively voted, and they deemed him guilty of mutiny, and they actually sentenced him to death by shooting. So this is kind of very similar to today's standings, and understanding that's kind of interesting to know the basics of it. Some other information that's really important when understanding capital punishment and its relation to the United States. 1972, the Furman versus Georgia case. Very big case for capital punishment to know about. This case actually was an accidental robbery, or death during a robbery, and the federal government actually voted that the death penalty was unconstitutional in regards to the Eighth Amendment in this case, due to discriminatory matters. So this is really important because for the next 4 years, no death penalty or executions were carried out, and it was kind of a confusing little topic. Then in 1976, during the Gregg versus Georgia case, the Supreme Court actually viewed it as constitutional again, and they reinstated it. And so during this time, 1976, it was very popular, and people really supported it. So the Supreme Court bringing it back, people had no issue with it. So kind of understanding the general idea of capital punishment and how it's applied is my next point. Capital punishment can only be sentenced to a person who commits a federal capital offense. So this is actually a offense that is specified in 41 different cases by the federal government, and it's also can be recognized differently by states, some extra situations, but essentially these offenses are very aggressive and hostile things, situations maybe like murder, treason, espionage, just very heinous crimes against humanity or maybe the nation. So death penalties aren't handed, or death sentences aren't handed out very free willy. People really have to have committed something to be even accused of a death penalty, I guess. So you can actually look at these 41 capital offenses and what other states recognize on deathpenalty.org. It gives a good list about it, and it's very interesting to go look at. So that kind of next step into how capital punishment is applied is if you're found guilty of a capital offense through a fair trial and all the correct procedures happened, then you are sentenced to death in one of 5 ways. So states actually get to choose their top method for how they carry out these executions, but there's only 5 that are recognized by the federal government, and only these 5 methods can be used by any of the states that authorize the death penalty. So these 5 methods are lethal injection, electrocution, hanging, firing squad, and lethal gas. So lethal injection is actually the number 1 method. It is the most used and the most advocated for amongst the society and people in the capital punishment world, and this is because states have a very specific rules about what can be used to inject, and so it's a lot of people stick with it. Next, something important to be able to form your opinion and understanding capital punishment in the United States is understanding its current standing and the future of it in the United States. So differing viewpoints creates a big divide. Religion and political aspects play a lot into how people form their opinions and talk about capital punishment. In a 2019 piece written by a woman named Elena DeSantis, who graduated magna cum laude with a political science degree, she actually wrote and kind of goes into analyze capital punishment and its relationship with the 8th Amendment, and she goes into more than just what was touched on in the Furman versus Georgia case, but more mental effects and stuff, and this is a very big argument right now. And so it's very important to stay up to date with situations like that and kind of the relationship between things like that. Tom Jackman, he's a crime and justice reporter for the Washington Report. He published a piece just last month in December titled "Executions, Death Sentences in the U.S. Reach Historic Lows in 2021." Now, this is really interesting because if you remember, I just, in the beginning, talked about how in 1999 we saw our highest number of executions. So in just a short number of years, we've actually kind of jumped the scale. And so all statistics are proving for a decline in approval for this. Jackman even quotes Robert Dunham, who's the executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center, saying there's a consistent national trend moving away from the death penalty. Dunham goes on to explain that these 2 major things were a religious shift kind of away from excessive punishment and a growing awareness for the flaws of the death penalty. So staying up to date kind of on those things and understanding that there is a decline is really important when looking at capital punishment here in the United States. With that being said, it's so important to stay up to date and understand what's happening with plain information. In a time when capital punishment is so divided and opinions are so different between each other, it's really important to be able to know the basics information and be able to understand that. Understanding just the basics of that and what capital punishment is and how it's applied and kind of its current standing is really important in doing that. To remain informed and stay updated with information like this, you can look at websites such as deathpenaltyinfo.org, where they provide updates on current capital punishment laws as well as current upcoming executions and their standings. So make sure to stay up to date and know your information before you form an opinion. Thank you.